Alright, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor, and today is the mid-year book freakout tag. So this is just going to be a little recap of how my reading year is going. If you like reading, crafting, or even just sitting and yapping, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Go check out my Instagram. I have a crochet Instagram, and I recently just kind of re-upped my Bookstagram account. So my craft account is Tatey Creations, and my book one is Tatey Creations _reads. So go check that out if you want to. Check out the Shopify link if you would like to support the channel by buying a physical product from me, or even just subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like really helps out. So let's jump right in. So the first question is, how many books have you read so far this year? I have read 80 books this year, and that is a lot. I cannot believe that I'm already at 80 books, so it makes me wonder how I'm going to do for the rest of the year. But I have been reading some fat, P-H-A-T, fat, thickums, thick, big books recently, and those take longer to read. But I'm having a really good time with it. So, second question, what's the best book you've read so far in 2025? And I actually have two for you because I couldn't really pick between them. So I have A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn and A True History of the United States by Daniel A. Sigerson. Both of these books have been so good to me this year. If you grew up in the United States, the history that you were taught in the public school system, if you went to public school, is probably pretty lackluster. I grew up in the Minnesota public school system, which is considered to be a pretty good public school system, and there were so many things in both of these books that I did not know. So A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn really focuses on what not the government was doing. So like, for example, it focuses a lot on the protests and the activism that happened that was like opposed to the government. How many uprisings in like slavery uprisings there were, and rebellions and different things, and how scared the slave owners were of an uprising because there were many more of them than there were, there were many more slaves than there were slave owners. So I thought that this really gave a more well-rounded view. I do think that to understand this book, you do have to have kind of a base level of knowledge of United States history. I do recommend this one. This was very eye-opening to me. And in the same vein, so was A True History of the United States. So Daniel A. Sigerson is actually a history professor at West Point Military Academy. I would say that, if we're going to put political affiliations on books, which you can, if we're going to, I would say that this book is like liberal, progressive. I would say this book is moderate, left-leaning. That doesn't mean that like one's better than the other. I would say this focuses a lot more on like what the government was doing, but it very much is like a warts and all sort of thing, being like, hey, the government did this and it was actually like super bad. And I like how this book gives more context to history. Like, it's a lot more of like an interpretation of it, rather than it calls for us to view these people in a historical sense as 3D or 4D like true people that like lived and had their own agendas to push, rather than the 2D caricatures that we've kind of been taught in our history lessons. So I really liked this book. This book was actually a little bit easier for me to get through than this one. I would say that this one is a lot more dry, more textbook-esque, but they are both definitely like the best books that I've read so far this year, and I would recommend both of them to anybody who just feels like they need to know a little bit more about your country. I've been seeing a lot of rhetoric around about people who say they like history, but really they like war and violence. I would say that like while war and violence, that is a big part of our history, these do not completely focus on that. Like I don't know what guns people were using or bullets or whatever. That is not the history that I like. And I've realized too that like the people who claim they like history, they just like violence. That's not me. And these two books have definitely turned me into someone who wants to know more history just in general. So, best 2 books so far of 2025. Question number 3, what has been your favorite sequel of the first half of the year? So I did do Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins for this one. I loved Haymitch's story. I consider a sequel to be anything in a series, because if we're only going to do like directly after the first book of a series, I haven't read too many of those this year. I think that we built out the world more. Haymitch's story is of course very, very sad. I really honestly already want to reread it, but I think I need to revisit like the Hunger Games trilogy. I also lent the book out to my mom, who hasn't read it yet. Mom, can you please read it because I need that back. But I'm really interested to see what they do with the movie. Next question, is there a new release that you haven't read yet but you're really excited about? And that one is Releasing 10 by Chloe Walsh. I have actually started this book. I'm about 60 pages in. I need to take many breaks with this book. There is already like something very like triggering and graphic that happens pretty early on in the book. I know that I will finish this, but really it's been, you know, a couple pages here and there for me. This is telling Lizzie and Huey's story, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I need us to get through the little, when they're like kids. So this one, I guess I don't know how it entirely goes, but it starts when they're like children. So it starts when Lizzie and Huey meet. So I am really excited about this book, but like I said, I have to be a little slow with it because I have to be emotionally in a good place for this. Next question, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And I tried looking at different lists of, you know, what's coming out for the rest of 2025. Honestly, I couldn't find anything that I was like, yes, this one. It just, nothing catches my attention at the moment, and there are so many more books that release than what is on Goodreads or what I found on like the Barnes & Noble thing, because they have like a page of like books that are gonna release this year and then like all the categories. Nothing really spoke to me as like, oh my god, I'm so excited to read that. So really, I was really anticipating like Sunrise on the Reaping and Releasing 10. So that's it for now. Next is, what are some underrated gems that you have found? So I have 2 for this one nonfiction, one fiction. So the fiction book is called Dionysus in Wisconsin by E.H. Lupton. So this book takes place in 1969 in Madison, Wisconsin. Madison, Wisconsin holds a very special place in my heart, and the author like lives in Madison or right outside of Madison, and the printing press is also in Madison. It's Winnowing Fan Press in Madison, Wisconsin. And I thought, you know, I picked up this one. This is the second book in the series. I picked this up at Tropes and Trifles, my local romance bookstore, and I was like, oh, I need to read the first one first. So I bought it on my Kindle for like $4. And it is like a cozy paranormal romance. It is 1969 in Madison, Wisconsin. It is set on the campus, and we follow Sam and Ulysses. Ulysses is kind of like a medium. He can like tell the energies of things. And Sam has some like stuff going on in his brain, not like mental illness sort of stuff, just like something he doesn't quite know what's going on. And their love story is so like cute. I do think that the romance takes a bit of a backseat to the plot, but I don't mind that, especially because it's also gay. I should also say that it's a gay relationship. And I like that we have, you know, this queer romance, and it's not like weird that these two guys want to be together in any sort of way. So I really, really liked that. It was very cozy. I'm very excited to read the next books in the series. So then the other underrated gem is Waste by Catherine Coleman Flowers. So this is the one about America's dirty secret, which is that there are many, many places in the United States that are living in third world conditions because of improper wastewater treatment. So this book is like part memoir, part activism. It's very short as well. And I just found this book to be very profound, and I thought that it really brought attention to something that like even I didn't know about. And obviously I can't know everything. Nobody knows everything. But so the author is from Lowndes County in Alabama, which is not far outside of Montgomery, the capital of Alabama. But they also talk about places like Flint, Michigan and Illinois and all of these very rural communities that have kind of been forgotten about. Like these people pay to have wastewater treatment, and then their waste is not treated. It basically just like backs up their toilet, or then it gets basically plopped onto their property, and that's illegal. Like you can't do that. So people are being put in prison, disproportionately Black and brown people are being put in prison for improper treatment of their own waste. But when you buy a septic tank, it's like $6,000 to install it, and then sometimes it doesn't work, and then you have to pay for plumbing. It's this whole thing and this cycle of like how expensive being poor is. So I thought that this book was like probably one of the most like essential nonfiction readings that I have read this year, and I think more people need to be reading it. It really doesn't have a whole lot of reviews on Goodreads, so I highly recommend going and checking that one out. Next question is biggest disappointment so far. I need everyone to be kind and compassionate when I say this. Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. I just did not like this one, okay? I read Assassin's Blade and Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. I read those. It was good. But it's hard because those first two books, so that would be Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, they're kind of a complete arc. So this is a completely different thing of what's going on. And it's hard when we go from like 2 POVs that are existing in the same space to 3 POVs that are existing in 3 completely separate places. I will be finishing this series, like I have no intentions of DNFing it, but I feel like there was so much setup in here. This is what I would call a buffer book. And I feel like I'm the only one who feels like that. When I was looking at reviews, everyone was like, best book ever, da da da. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what is going on. I feel like none of this matters. I mean, of course things happen that matter. I'm excited to see where the rest of the series goes. I just think that this was like a buffer book. I think that that's a good way of saying that. My biggest surprise so far was Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. There's just so many things about poverty that we don't understand when we live in a middle class or like working class. We live that lifestyle. And when I say working class, I mean, it's hard because if you work a job, you are working class, right? And so I guess I mean people who don't really have to live like paycheck to paycheck, or, you know, one medical bill won't completely put you under. But even if you have like a stable job, that can still happen to you. But we're talking about like extreme poverty mostly in this book. I feel like we don't understand it because we live in this capitalist society where we basically have to have like a food chain because that is the way our society is set up. And then we act like being poor is a moral failing rather than what it actually is, which is a failure of your government to take care of you, because there is no reason why we can't take care of our poor. Some people are like, oh, well, they should work hard, they should do this, they should do that. I know plenty of people who really struggle, who have jobs, who work their asses off, and yet they can't do anything to, you know, get out of this cycle. So you have to be in such a place of privilege to say something like that. And it's infuriating to me, in my opinion. And we learn about how much like fear mongering or like misinformation that is like set out about poor people. Like, oh, all these government handouts. You know who gets the most handouts? The people at the top with tax breaks and being able to like write off loans and all of these tax breaks that upper class people get. And then very little of that is seen on, in the lowest classes of society. Like, for example, Bill Clinton created this thing called the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families funds. So they're called TANF funds. And it is an allocated amount of money given to each state. So some states did use that as like cash monies for people who needed it. But there are other places like Oklahoma who took those funds and put it into marriage counseling, when there is no research that supports that marriage counseling makes people get married or helps them economically. You know what makes people want to get married? Economic stability. So if we lift people out of poverty, more people are going to get married and more babies are going to be born, which is what we all want, right? It is mind-boggling to me that Republicans talk about how much they want babies with no incentives to have babies. I thought we were gonna get a $5,000 like handout for having babies. That's not in the big beautiful bill that's on the House floor right now. Like, it is absolutely mind-boggling to me how we will not help the needy among us, especially when Jesus says to help thy neighbor and gave no indicators for that neighbor. And I'm not even a very religious person, but I know that a lot of the opposition of these things are religious people, and they think that somehow being poor is like a moral failing. Jesus didn't think that. Me and Jesus, we're homies. But that's the thing, is like, I like the teachings of Jesus, but the people who claim to follow Jesus they're not followers of Jesus. They are following something else. Excuse that rant, but let's keep moving along. Book that made me cry. Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh. Oh my god. I was reading this book at like kind of the climax of it when I was on the bus with my students. So I'm like reading on my phone. They're all laughing and like having a good time. We're on our way home from a competition and I'm sitting in the front seat crying because of what's happening in this book. It is so sad. So the Boys of Tommen series, the first one is Binding 13, the second one is Keeping 13, and both of those books are about Shannon and Johnny. And so the Keeping 13 is the second book, and there's a lot of really, not deep, dark things that happen in these books, a lot of like poor home life and like family abuse and trauma sort of things going on, but like Johnny, so that's happening in like Shannon's family, and then Johnny's like pretty good. He's just a really intense athlete. So that one I bawled. Another book that made me cry a lot was The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. So that one is, I read that one in January, so forgive me for not remembering every single little detail, but essentially it's about the Dust Bowl, and then this woman takes her children to go work in California because that is kind of where is seen to be the land of abundance during the Dust Bowl, because they live, so her and her husband and her children and her like extended in-laws lived in Texas, and then the Dust Bowl came and nothing can grow, they're all starving to death. And so she's like, I don't want my kids to starve to death. I'm gonna take them to California, and how they had to live in these little ramshackle huts and all of the prejudice that they experienced. Even though they were still white, they called them Okies. And they were like, but we're from Texas, we're not from Oklahoma. Anybody who like wasn't from California was an Okie at that time. And they wouldn't give them housing, they wouldn't give them food. These were farm hands, and they just had to work. And then there was also, like a sharecropper farm, and and the protests and all these things. It's a very good book. It's very sad. And that book is why I have not read any other Kristen Hanna, because I need to be emotionally in a very good place to read more Kristen Hanna. But The Four Winds was very, very good, and it made me cry a lot. A book that made me happy. So this is a series. I read Heartstopper volumes 1 through 5 by Alice Osman, and I just loved it. Those books are like a warm hug. If you don't know, they are graphic novels about Nick and Charlie. They are two boys who fall in love in secondary school. It is based in somewhere in the United Kingdom. It's not really very specific, but they do play rugby, so that's an indicator. Charlie is gay, and Nick, he's not quite sure if he's like gay or bi or, you know, how he's feeling. The first book is about them like falling in love, and then volumes 2 through 5 are such beautiful representations of like healthy queer love. These books also like made me cry because they're so wholesome, and it makes me angry that any sort of like queer love or representation is seen as like pornographic, and those books are not that at all. It's truly just a celebration of love, and it just really made my heart happy. I've been really emotional lately, I don't know why. Okay, and the last question is, what books do you want to read by the end of the year? And I mean, I got a lot of books that I want to read. I have been actually reading more physical books. I finished 6 books off my physical TBR in June. Granted, I still listen to the audiobooks of those physical books, but I like tandem read them, so it still counts. So I do have like my little TBR cart here. If you saw like my summer TBR video, go check that out. That like all these books are on there. There are a few other books that I do want to get to that I'm going to show you. So I have a small stack here of books that I really want to prioritize reading by the end of this year. So the first one is gonna seem kind of random, but let me cook here. So first I have Walden and Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau. The reason why I want to read this is because I'm actually reading The Goldfinch right now by Donna Tartt, and our main character Theo in this book is reading Walden for one of his like English classes. So, and he actually talks about it quite a lot, not in super depth, but he talks about reading it. I am currently reading The Goldfinch. I know that Donna Tartt is a controversial author. I would not say that this is like amazing. I guess I'll have to see. I'm about 50% through it right now. I'm just so, it feels so mid. It feels so mid. But I do have this, so I was like, let's see. Plus, I haven't read a classic in a little bit, so want to get back on my classics game. The next 2, or 3 actually, are rereads. Okay, so I got 3 rereads and 3 new books. So the first one is Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. This was my #1 book of 2024. I read it in January of 2024, and I really just think that I need to reread it. I think that there could be a really good prose piece in here for one of my students. I don't know what student that is yet. That's the thing, is I want to have a backlog of pieces that I've created so that I can like give them to students if they're like, oh, I care about this. Oh, here's a piece. I know something like that. You know, that's part of me being a coach, is being able to guide them. A lot of students come in and they're like, I want to do this and this is what we're gonna do. And I'm like, sure. Next one is Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This was also a book I read last year, and I have just been craving a reread of this. I do have a Junji Ito book checked out from my Libby right now that I do need to read really bad, but it's a short story collection. Those won't take me very long. Uzumaki is about a town that's infested with spirals, which is like such a weird concept, but when I tell you, it is done so good. So I'm really excited to reread that. Then I have All About Love by Bell Hooks. This was also a book I read last year. Last year was a great reading year. And I have read 2 other Bell Hooks books this year, and I just keep thinking like, God, I need to return to this book. Not because I've forgotten it, but because I keep telling people about it, and I think I need to like reread it, refresh it in my brain so that I can, you know, tell more people about it. I also just, I don't know, I want to get back into her head. It's an amazing place to be. And then these final 2 books, this is the next book in the Throne of Glass series, so nothing really new there. So we got Sarah J. Maas, Queen of Shadows. And then this last book here is a nonfiction. It is Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years, Women, Cloth, and Society in Early Times by Elizabeth Whalen Barber. So I've had this book for quite a while, and honestly, I need to read it. As someone who loves clothing and textiles as much as I do, I have recently come to terms with the fact that I do think I am in fact a little bit of a fashion girly. It's just I'm not a fashion girly in the way of the influencer or, you know, the girl who always has the good thrift finds. I mean, I have had some good thrift finds, but in terms of like, I like making my own stuff. But also even people who do that, normally they're sewists. So I feel like, you know, it's such a small niche of crocheters that are like fashion girlies, I guess we could say. But this one was recommended by Jillian Eve on YouTube about a year ago, I think is when I saw that. So, and that was before I was in my nonfiction reading girl era, in my knowledge forever era. I forgot this one on the first run through. Stephen King's The Shining. My boyfriend just finished reading this actually, and he's reading the sequel, Dr. Sleep. And he said that this was super, super good, that he really liked it, and that it made the movie so bad, apparently. So I need to read this soon, you know, so that we can talk about it and watch the movie, because I've still never seen the movie. And I feel like this is, I think I've said this before on the channel, but I haven't said it in a while. Stephen King has like 3 quintessential books that are like, you read those books, and I always say that that's Carrie, Pet Sematary, and The Shining. I read Carrie and Pet Sematary. So like Carrie was his first book, and Pet Sematary is what he considers to be his darkest work. And so then I also think that in terms of the book, this one is like the most popular. I know that it, in terms of like the movie franchise, is super, super popular, but not a lot of people read that book. I have that book. I'm looking at it right now. It's 1,000 pages. It is a fat book. So I need some time before I read that, for sure. So yeah, The Shining is also gonna go on here. That's the tag. So thank you so much for watching today, you guys. Don't forget to check out my Instagram and the Shopify. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more bookish content like this. I had such a fun time hanging out with you and yapping with you today, and I will see you next time. Bye!